This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of Tapped In. I'm your host, Bud, here with Mikey. Mikey, how are you today, big guy?
I'm good, man. Yeah, good. Back in the city life, back in civilization after 2 weeks in northern Michigan woods, which was absolutely outstanding. But feels good to be back too.
Your internet performance is considerably better, I'm sure, as well.
It is, yeah. It definitely it's taken a little bit of a stress load off being able to connect.
That's awesome. Well, today's topic, Mikey, we're going to get into something that I've been working on. It'll be a couple different topics, probably long term, but I'm starting out with calling this entitlements or incentives versus entitlements, how to get more effort out of your team. So we'll start there. And the whole idea behind this episode is discretionary effort. Like, how are we getting discretionary effort out of our teams? But in order to get to that point, we have to talk about these things called entitlements first. So let's define entitlements to get started with. So entitlements are things that are required payment or compensation for a team member. So think like healthcare. There's like a really good entitlement, 401k, PTO, sick, vacation time, your base pay, like all the kind of like just dollars and cents that you make make from the business as an employee. So that's where it gets started with. And to me, examples of it all, or kind of like a thought process around what it is. If you don't want to label them like that, if they're consistent and predictable and they're clear and they're inclusive, so they include everybody, it's an entitlement. If it's different or there's unpredictability or it's variable or there's something different, it's an incentive. They're trying to get discretionary effort out of it. So even higher level, if we don't want to label them, we can go into that world. So Mikey, at our operation, we were pretty consistent around what an entitlements were and weren't, right? I felt like around base pay, your healthcare, all that good stuff, right?
Yeah, communicated clearly. All the entitlements were there in our handbook.
Yep. That's a good thing. Like a lot of this can be found in your handbook too. Like, and even some of the things that could be called fringe benefits can turn into entitlements too, which are around your cell phone, your car, if you have a car allowance or a mileage allowance, what that may be. Do you get gas? Or can you basically use your car for personal use? Can you not? Those are all things that are entitlements as well. So that to me is what entitlements become or are. Now, where I want to have some fun with the group is around how there are misappropriated entitlements and how we can balloon entitlements in terms of the number of entitlements that we may be offering to people. So the first example of this that I'm going to pick on is our inclusive annual Christmas bonus, the Clark Griswold, right? So one of the things at our operation that my family did regularly was give a standardized Christmas bonus to everybody. And when was that given, Mikey?
It was like a week or two before Christmas every year.
And it was ranged between $500 to $1,500 depending on your level of team, remember, right?
Correct, yeah. Yep.
So what I always found is like a problem with this is that because it was consistent and inclusive and predictable, it was an entitlement. And what my family always thought about it was that it's a nice it's a nice thing. And this is things that, people will stay connected to us because, and all of us like, well, if we want to be connected to it, or you think it is, just pay them another $20 a month or whatever it is, or $30 or 40 or $50 a week and make it up. Like that's just because you're harnessing or hoarding this bonus until the end of the year. We're not getting any incremental discretionary effort out of it. And it just never connected with me the right way. And the story that I always like to tell is, or that I have been told secondhand now, actually better said, is that one of our former team members actually saw Sarah recently and said, I didn't always agree with everything that Bud did, but I know he always had a reason for it. But taking the Christmas bonus really kind of hit me hard the first year he did that.
Oh, wow. That got brought up.
It did, yes. And Sarah and I talked about it, and like at the end of the day, this individual made more money the following year. But that's the problem with an entitlement, is that when you take it away, it becomes World War III. When you give it, it becomes like right away, it's this super awesome event and super awesome opportunity. Long term, as you need to peel these things back, it's like you're going to war over it. We also did hams, Mikey. I think the hams may have been like really early in my career because I don't
Yeah.
remember killing the hams personally. I'm not sure if I was the one who killed the hams or not.
That was your grandma's thing. She did every year, and yeah, it was. I mean, they were great hams. And I remember I was our operations manager at the time, so when we'd get a pallet or a half pallet of hams, and we had to store in our keg room at temperature, and every year I always thought, like, man, this is a great gesture. It's a great ham. We cook it every year. It tastes great, but that's just an unneeded expense. That can't be cheap. I mean, hams are not cheap, and to order a half a pallet of them, and I remember every year there's at least 10, maybe even 12 left over that people just didn't take. So talk about an unneeded expense.
It's interesting that people didn't take them either because I don't remember myself killing the ham. I'd be right on brand for me to kill the hams and take
It
the
would
ham.
be, yeah, it would be
So
Bud,
it's
yeah.
right on brand. So I could be the one that ultimately did this. We'd have to ask Sandy for historical reference and around who did kill the hams. But again, this is back to the point of like it's it becomes an entitlement so quickly, and it's something that is expected, and some people don't even appreciate it. So we're taking
Exactly.
on the expense, we're allocating resources to buy the hams. We've got a third of the people, if 12 people didn't pick it up, it's basically like a third of the people not taking their ham. So you got 2/3 of the people benefiting, 1/3 of the people not even taking it or not even caring about it. Yet, if you take it away, it's World War III. My other funny story that I've heard, this is not something I've had personal experience with, but I heard from another CEO in a different industry that they started on the back end of COVID. They started doing catered lunches for their team 3 days a week. And it became a way to try to attract folks back to the office. And initially it was an incredible like uplift and bring and get people to come back to the office. What happened about a month in this story is that people started to get picky about what they were getting. And then it was like, oh, it's taco day again. Why are we having pizza on Wednesday? Pizza should be Friday. Oh, this stuff isn't that good. Like this guy is, catering this. We should never order from him again. And it's just funny how fast this entitlement stuff just move, or this gifts or these new things or these things we're trying to do move towards an entitlement, and we're not getting that incremental effort we're trying to get to. So the key takeaway here, again, back to, summarize it, if it's consistent, if it's predictable, clear, and inclusive, it creates zero discretionary effort. You're talking about an entitlement. Now, if you want to give a ham or a turkey or an annual bonus, knowing full well that it is an entitlement and will be viewed as such and will be treated as such by your team, then go for it. But don't expect incremental effort from your crew, or don't be sad if people aren't giving you incremental effort because they are doing it or because you're doing it this way.
Absolutely. And you might even create a little bit of disengagement too. I mean, if it's not consistent, if you're giving away a Christmas bonus every year, but the price ranges on maybe company performance or whatever the variable may be, and the employee has it stuck in his head of this amount and they get a lesser amount, the employee's gonna be, I mean, basically pissed, right? Like, hey, I got screwed this year. Why was my bonus so low? Like back to the Clark Griswold comment reference. I mean, so then now you have another month, maybe month and a half of poor performance because now this employee is mad at the company, and you've created some disengagement when it's trying to do something nice.
You bring up a great point there of that if it's expectations, if you have variability in the entitlement, then the expectation changes so much, then you get pissed off. It's very similar to, if we put it in the context of a classic entitlement, like if you changed somebody's base pay on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis at your whim, you would annoy the piss out of people too. So that is a dramatization, as the we wouldn't do that. I mean, only a crazy person would do that. I'm not so sure how legal it is or isn't to do that either. But only a crazy person would. But because it's an annual thing and you're doing it differently, then that will create some distraction. I always thought too, Mikey, you know, quick pit stop on like the discussion around entitlements. Like every year we had to have a healthcare discussion around what the cost was going to be from the company's perspective and how much that cost share was going to be from the employee's perspective. And I always felt like we would usually takes like 6 weeks to enroll people into healthcare. So, or at least give them notification on everything. So it was like we spent 10, almost 11 months on momentum towards culture and towards positive and towards all the stuff we were trying to do. And as soon as I opened my mouth about here's how much your healthcare is going to cost next year, here's the difference, here's the plans we're offering, did we need to change any plans? Somebody's favorite plan is now not offered anymore because it's too expensive or it's been cut by the healthcare company. It became this whole distraction backwards. And it was like we took 10 forward and took like 7 or 8 back, and it was like this constant back and forth.
And no matter the scenario, it's always going to be the company's fault. If the provider, the costs go up, and even if the company pitches in more than they were the previous year, the costs go up. Obviously, the employee's costs are going to go up too. That's always going to fall on the employee or on the company as far as a blame, not so much the provider. So,
yeah. So you need to talk about it. It's part of being an employer and having a team and owning a company. It's just a challenge that you've got to get through. So that's kind of like the entitlement discussion. Now, moving towards the incentive discussion where we want to get discretionary effort, I'm going to share this visual to get started. So let me do that. And for those of you on the YouTube or I'm watching on the video, you'll be able to see this. So this is, to me, what we're trying to get done with discretionary effort. So what do I have to do as an employee to be invited back to work tomorrow is what do I have to do or minimum required. These are the things that entitlement should be connected towards. The other thing that I failed to talk about with entitlements too is that these are the things that you're often compared to when you're looking at other employers to go work for as an employee. How much you pay per hour, what your bonus is, what your health care is. These are the minimum things that employees talk about with one another, intra the company, and externally with their friends and their peers too. Where we want to get to for the remainder of the discussion today is ideas, thoughts, fun topics around how do I get discretionary effort out of the team? Where do I bring variability? And because this is a tapped in sales podcast, we'll be focused a lot on the sales apparatus of the distribution companies rather than anything else. But we're probably getting the weeds on some other things. So that discretionary effort side is another piece of the puzzle that we want to talk to and focus on. So Mikey, when we were working on this with sales teams around getting discretionary effort, you can start wherever you want, whether you want to start with clients or you want to talk about experience at Atlas. Like, where did you start with, and you're thinking about that?
I loved it when we would show up unexpectedly with our merchandising team with $100 cash per merchandiser, just as a thank you, maybe after a holiday week, or maybe after, somebody went out and went above and beyond or picked up the slack, totally unexpected. And it went a long way. So appreciative. I mean, that was always wonderful to be able to go out and do. And I feel like the return on investment on that was huge because, I mean, in merchandisers, it's a pretty tough position to hire for and usually keep somebody, especially if they're really good at their job, because somebody else is going to pick them up or whatnot and offer them a sales position. But yeah, being able to do that, I think it went a long way. Same thing with the sales team. Any, above and beyond, like, hey, I noticed that you did this, and it didn't even have to be monetary. It could be just, hey, let's go out to lunch, or hey, here's this, or a gift card, or a thank you, or even just a call out goes a long way.
Serendipitous for the merchandisers, where it's not necessarily randomized. Randomized isn't necessarily the right way to do it, but it's serendipitous in giving validation and recognition towards a level of effort that management or leadership noticed. And by doing that, because it's serendipitous and it's post after the fact, and you're validating and recognizing them, it has this incremental like human connection where it's like what I did mattered today to my team.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, like the valuation on it is really up to you. Do you want to make it transactional and add dollars to it? You totally can make it transactional and add dollars to it. You can also make it transactional in the form of a gift card or in the form of, a night out or whatever it is like that too. And then you can do it more relationship driven around calling out, going above and beyond, pointing them out. Those are all things that humans, as we connect with, and helps guide discretionary effort. And there's kind of a lot of brain science around this too. So if you take your hand and you make a fist, then you think of this as a brain. Like there's a prefrontal cortex, which is the front of your brain. That's all the decision making capabilities. Like when kids and toddlers are frustrated and they're mean or they're, pain in the asses, it's because their prefrontal cortex isn't always formed. We have some adults that have those problems too.
We
But
blame that. We blame that scenario on for my son for many, many years, and then finally we're like, it's not that.
it's not that. Okay. Well, so then there's that. But right behind it sits your thumb in this diagram, and it's called the limbic system. And the limbic system is all about what's next and how am I doing. And it runs our human side of like, what is next, boss man, and how am I doing at it? And what is next and how am I doing at it? And if you can tap into that brain science the right way, you can get discretionary effort out of your team. So that's where that serendipitous piece is like, what's next and how am I doing? They're tapping into that, how am I doing, and reinforcing it over and over again. I think that connects really well with like what we're doing with VXP and clients around utilizing the technology to shorten up the feedback loop around how is a team member doing and getting more engagement out of them too. It's one thing to put out a bunch of incentives or a bunch of programs or PFP platforms and update them weekly or bi-weekly. It's another thing to have it boomerang back to somebody on a daily basis and see what I did yesterday and how am I doing and what's next and how am I doing. And that constant feedback loop to me is where the technology really comes into play, that we have these tools now to reinforce the kind of brain science behind this so you can elicit and get more discretionary effort out of it, out of a team and out of a person too.
Absolutely. I mean, that connects with me on a personal level too. I always like to know, how am I doing? How did I perform on that task? Did I meet expectation? Am I doing okay? So yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that for sure.
Now, other things out there around like other ways that we've seen people do this, do you have any other specific examples where we've engaged what's next and how am I doing that is either fun or qualitative? or
Yeah.
quantitative?
I mean, mostly just with the sales staff, even operational. I go back to my operation days too. And, we had a lot of part-time employees, seasonal employees, because in Michigan, our seasonal swing, obviously, you get in June, July, and August, and you can pick up some college kids to come in and help as well. But it goes a long way of walking out there and just saying, hey, I'm going to pick up lunch today. It wasn't an every Friday thing, or it wasn't an every Tuesday thing. It wasn't pizza Wednesday, Taco Tuesday, where everybody relied on it. But being able to just walk out to the warehouse and saying, you guys are doing a really great job this week. Appreciate the extra effort. I've noticed it. Here, thank you. Let's do lunch. Or, hey, it's Friday. Things are winding down. It's 1 o'clock. There's 2 trucks left out. I'm going to go ahead and pick those up. You guys go home. Enjoy your weekend. Things like that. Anything that goes a long way. Recognition is the biggest thing, right? I mean, a thank you or just noticing somebody's efforts really goes a long way. Sometimes farther than money.
And you can try these little experiments on, like, if you have kids, you can play around and try these little experiments with kids around adjusting their even like allowance around, like, here's what you get paid on a weekly basis for doing this, this, and this task. Those are your entitlements. And then here is the value that you could get for cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the bathroom, cleaning that, like doing that discretionary effort piece. And you could see how they work with it. And then you can also throw in, a couple of good examples that you've thrown in, Mikey, is like the serendipitous nature. When I give somebody, a little spiff or a little lunch, or I'm going to do this fun thing. And you can make it very activity based too. Memories or connections to experiences are really big right now with the younger generation, but frankly, it's all generations enjoy experiences too. So like having that, experience of going on a company outing or playing golf or taking a day off and to play golf with a customer or do anything else that's more casual or relaxing with your peers and with your team is an incredible opportunity to create that human connection and that peace. And the real side of this is that, we're hardwired for connection. Humans are herd animals by nature. And the more that we can bring that kind of human herd animal mentality into the workforce with getting discretionary effort, having connections, also having entitlements tweaked and managed the right way, the more likely we are to have a healthier, happier workforce, retain them longer, and attract the new top tier talent that you're looking for as well, which is a really, really important piece of the puzzle too. And if you can play around with these things and find them that they're authentic to you, I think that's a really important piece. That the way that we chose to do things at Atlas was incredibly authentic to how Atlas would do things.
And I think that what you just said went a long way, because when you think about our retention, our employee retention, was really, really good. I mean, we went, probably 20 years without having to hire a driver at one point, right? Merchandisers, we were able to hold on to merchandisers, and the competition, for whether you're a merchandiser, sales, driver, whatever you did for competition, they always wanted to work for Atlas. You always heard that, hey, next time you guys are hiring, let me know. Hey, I'd love to work for you guys. I've heard nothing but good things. So even outside of our internal culture, that also got out to competition and other employees. I mean, that was, hey, I really want to work for Atlas because you guys take care of your employees. You treat everybody great. Everybody seems really happy. So that goes a long way too when you're trying to find new talent and bring new people in.
Yeah. And from our authenticity side, we had a group of people, I would always talk about that were land of misfit toys. There are people that worked in our organization that wouldn't fit in or wouldn't be a piece in the puzzle in another organization just because of the way we chose to do things. And I say land of misfit toys with all the love in my heart, because I think Tom Brady, even a top performer like him, is one of those examples. He probably doesn't become the quarterback he became in another organization. I mean, that's been publicly talked about, that there are just certain pieces of the puzzle that just fit. And you've heard me talk about this, is kind of off topic a little bit. We ran our attraction engine around employee retention and attraction from the sole vantage point of we are trying to get people to opt in to come into work at Atlas. And we are trying to help people opt out as fast as possible if this doesn't work for you. And, it really was something we chose to own around, and you've heard me talk about this in the office tons and tons of times. Like, we want people to opt in to come into work here. We don't want people who want to change the way we do things. We don't want people who want to, completely transform or blow this up. Like, we have a process. It works. It's been working. We're going to keep it. You get people to opt in, and we help people opt out as fast as possible.
And those people that wanted to opt out didn't have to limp all the way through December to get the Christmas bonus that they were expecting. Oh, I'm done with this place in August.
Or their ham.
I'm going to limp through to December to collect my ham and my $500 before I leave. We didn't have that problem either.
And we always waited until January to do our holiday party, our holiday pub crawl. So nobody was going to stick around for that either.
You're right. Yeah. Yep. What are you drinking? Are you drinking out of a keg?
I don't have my normal water bottle. It's getting clean, so I have my gallon Yeti bottle.
Is that a stick you're sipping? Oh my gosh.
Oh man. Well, this is a good topic to kind of summarize and rebalance or recap everybody. Is like balancing incentives to try to get discretionary effort is completely different than managing your entitlement structure. Knowing and understanding what your entitlements are, I would go through and list them. If you never had before, I would go through and list them out and decide and even have a discussion with your team. Like, are we doing things that we think are discretionary effort builders, but they actually operate like entitlements? And you can keep them too. Like, we always did a holiday lunch, and we didn't always do a holiday party, but we got back to doing a holiday party. Like, you can do all of those things. And I would argue that our holiday lunch was a big hoopla where we basically bought food, takeout style, plus made a little bit of food in-house. And it was leading up to Christmas, usually 1 or 2 days before Christmas, where we provided lunch for basically 2 days because we bought food for like 400 people. But that was what we liked to do. And it was an entitlement, but it was something that was an entitlement that our organization chose to keep in practice because it worked for us. And the same thing with, and it had nothing to do with us watching inappropriate movies or maybe not even inappropriate, but like questionable workplace movies during the middle of the day. Very questionable. Yes. And then, we did the holiday party too. We kind of stopped that for a little bit and then we brought it back. And it again was reimagined authentic, where it was, we all got on a school bus and we did a pub crawl, or we went to one of our accounts and it was pretty low key and it wasn't white glove or it wasn't fancy because that wasn't who we are.
Yeah, it was very Atlas. Yep. It was very
you should do it. So write them down, keep with them if you want to understand, play around with experiments, trying this serendipitously, try it with your kids, try it at home, try it with your spouse or your partner, and you'll be amazed at like how you can kind of see this human connection come in. And the last thing I want to leave everybody with is like, remember that, for the last 100 some odd years, up until about 10 years ago, we were in a labor surplus market where there were more people who wanted to work and could work than there were jobs available. So it was tournament labor is what it's called. So I would be in a tournament to find the next job with 4 or 5 other people. Now it's flipped. There are more jobs than there are able bodies or people willing to work. So when that is flipped, we have to do things differently, and we have to attract talent. We have to retain talent. We have to change our practices around entitlements and incentives to get these people in the door, because now for every one employee, there's like 4 or 5 jobs in a lot of places, or 3 or 4 in a lot of places. So, and that is pretty much consistent across the board in the U.S. right now. There's a handful of exceptions where that's not the case, but there's pretty much an exception where we are constantly negotiating for the top tier talent. If you take these ideas and you run with them and build on them, or if you want to connect with us, because this is kind of like a sideline, really kind of pet project of mine to talk about these things. We spend a lot of time in implementation talking about it with clients too, that we can tweak these things and get them scenarioed out right so that you're getting more performance from the team as well, especially on the sales side. So, Mikey, I think that does it for today's episode. For those listeners out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us in another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast. Mikey, cheers, my man.
Cheers.